Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are listening from or watching from. This is Leadership Talk with ADEGOKE. This is the 79th podcast. Yes, 79. And I have the privilege of speaking with me uh, on this session, Leadership and Storytelling. I have Soundari. Soundari, how are you?
Very good, Adigoki. Lovely to connect with you. It's
Awesome.
morning there for you. It's evening here for me. It's 5 or 6. And though it's May here, it is suddenly there's a dip in the temperature here. So it's pretty interesting times.
Awesome. Awesome. So you're speaking from Hong Kong?
I'm speaking from Hong Kong today.
Awesome. Awesome. How long have you been in Hong Kong?
Yeah, so I've been here 16 years.
Awesome.
Uh, so it's, and Hong Kong is called the fragrant harbor. So I think it grows on you. You pick up the fragrance and you really settle down in the place like this.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on Leadership Talk with Adegoke, the podcast. We're so privileged to have you, and I'm sure our listeners will get a lot of value from this session. Now, tell us, who is Soundari?
That's always a tough question. There's an easy way of answering it, maybe, which is to say I'm the chief everything officer at Soundbites 11. I'm an organizational consultant and business storytelling coach. I
Okay,
help leaders and teams drive business outcomes, build a personal brand, and be more human at work using storytelling. However,
awesome.
I don't want to stick to a label or go by a definition. I'm very inspired, by Lucy Kellaway, who used
Okay,
to be a journalist at Financial Times.
all
And
right.
after decades of a journalist career, she reinvented herself as a teacher. So
Wow.
I studied finance. I did my, cost accounting. I did my MBA in finance, and then I pivoted to the talent space. So I
Yeah,
always feel like there are like two characters on my shoulder. One is the finance one, and one is the people one. And I won't
yeah.
say which is the devil or the angel, but there's always a good
Wow.
conversation there.
Awesome, awesome,
And I
awesome,
want to
awesome.
think of all of us as people who have a lot of potential. So, multi potentialite is a word. I
That's
just feel
right.
that you can be successful in multiple careers like you're doing now. I mean, other than your talent consulting, you are doing your podcast, 79th episode. Congratulations on
Thank you
that.
so much. Thank you so
And so
much.
I think that's been my biggest realization over the last few years, that
All right.
you're not only a corporate employee or an entrepreneur, you can be a faculty, you can be a mentor, you can be a
Mm,
potter, you can be a tennis player. And all
mm.
of these things really connect to make you a better person and create a better impact.
Awesome, awesome. I just love that. I just love that about you, Sandari. Because you come as a very authentic person, and I don't use that word carelessly. Um, you know, I mean, we have almost similar backgrounds. I studied finance and moved to did an MBA. I did a master's also in real estate. So cuts across real estate, finance, talent management, leadership, customer service. But I can tell you, it helps to give me a very interesting story, because my journey, which I'm sure yours is also very interesting as we're going to be learning, has helped us to also be able to add more value in the space. So you're welcome. Now, tell us, how did you get into leadership?
Yeah. So I think, when I was working with ANZ and before that with Unilever, one of the things that really struck me was that as you go deeper into an organization, while your
Mm,
domain expertise is very important, which is what gets you into the door,
mm,
your ability to actually connect the dots across disciplines is really
mm.
what matters. And
Wow.
what matters even more is just dealing with people and how you're
Mm,
with people. Because as a leader, you're not really doing anything to, to be honest. What you're doing is creating space for others to thrive.
that's
And
right.
I think just going into that, so it's almost what I call the M shaped leadership. So you
Wow.
have your domain verticals like you have on your real estate, on your finance, on your talent, but you're really connecting the dots and creating those arches across these disciplines. And
That's right.
I I think we're all evolving about our definition of leadership itself, right? I think
Yeah.
when you start off initially as a new leader, the leadership begins with yourself. It is very introspective, it is very focused on the self, and it can put a lot of pressure on the person.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to now look at it more on what is the impact that you have outward on
Mm.
others.
That's right.
I remember when I was heading one of the branches at ANZ, and this is way back in the 90s, I used
Yeah.
to have a tracker for sales conversations. And at that time, even Excel was not very popular. It was probably Lotus 123 or something, but I used to keep a physical notebook.
Yeah.
And I would religiously follow up with reminders in my diary, in my file of facts, have it dated and all that. And I didn't realize how much of an impact that was having on my relationship managers in my team about
Wow.
creating that discipline of follow up. Recently, just about a few weeks back, I reconnected with one of my relationship managers who used to be a relationship manager for me 30 years back. But 30
Wow.
years later, he talked about how that defined him, and that is something, that practice is something that he followed in all his
Amazing.
sales jobs to good
Wow.
effect. I know.
Wow.
So I think sometimes we don't realize some of the impact of what these are. We follow from others, we look at the
Mm.
discipline of others, what they do. And
Mm.
you do want leadership to be self-forming these days. It is a
Yeah.
capacity of a human community to shape
Mm.
its future.
That's
And I
right.
think as we go, leadership will be more who is a relationship manager. How are you
Mm.
dealing with your stakeholders? And I
Mm.
always think of this person, Arne Sorensen, who
Okay.
used to be the CEO of Marriott. Sadly, he passed away last year.
Wow.
And in the thick of the pandemic, he wanted to come and speak to his people. And
Sorry to
all
hear
his
that.
press crew and his PR guys were saying, no, 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 don't go on video. And the reason was that he comes on video to make this talk to his team. And
Mm.
like he used to have nice, dark, thick hair. And in the video, all his hair is gone.
It's gone.
That's
Wow.
because he was taking treatment for disease. And
Mm.
he said that my PR folks told me don't go on camera. And he said, as you know, I am taking treatment. So this is how I look. This is me. And I want to be here for my team. I want to
Mm.
talk to my team in person rather
Wow.
than just an audio. And he lays out how difficult, obviously, for the hotel industry pandemic has been. He talks about, really acknowledging the reality of the situation, talks
Mm.
about how he and his team are taking a salary. They're not going to take salary for a few months. He
Mm.
also talks about what is the plan of the future. So really leaving them with a optimistic, hopeful note of what the
Mm.
future might be. And
Awesome.
I really think that it's like almost like, I'm sure you read Brené Brown as well. It's
Yeah.
like really having the courage to be imperfect,
Mm.
being vulnerable about yourself there,
Mm.
connecting in an authentic way, and really being compassionate about others, being aware of others and what they do. And I think that's where leadership is really headed now.
Awesome. Awesome. So what tell us about storytelling. What is this about storytelling? Because it's quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what I've been sharing in this conversation so far as well, right?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
story of your story, my story, story of leaders like Arne and things like that. So, storytelling in business is all about being purposeful, deliberate, and systematically applying story techniques. So,
Mm.
for an organization to help deliver business outcomes.
Mm.
And it is a human skill, especially in these days when we're talking about three C's:
Mm.
communicate, communicate, communicate. That's all we
Mm.
hear, right? It's all
Mm.
about communication.
Yeah.
And Stanford did this research talking about what is it that really helps shape organizations and their culture. And they said storytelling is what really shapes. It is what are the values that you encourage and what you don't value and you discourage.
Awesome.
And today, like you do in your podcast, we are all trying to grapple for three things. We are
Mm.
grappling for attention.
That's
We
right.
are looking at how we can cut through all the noise, all the content rich environment, so many options that people have. How can we
That's
grab
right.
people's attention? We are
Mm.
looking for comprehension. How
Mm.
can you simplify the complex? How can you use less jargon? How can you
Mm.
talk human to human?
That's
Right?
right.
And we are talking about retention. How
Mm.
can you, as a leader, make your messaging very sticky? How
Mm.
can it be something that people listen and follow and feel influenced and inspired?
That's
And
right.
becomes very, very crucial. And I'm thinking about, in working with leaders, you realize that the good leaders really use examples to make a point,
Mm.
and that's how they build trust as well. And I'm thinking about Obama and Jack Ma. They were
Yeah.
at this apex summit in Manila in November 2015,
That's
and
right.
in the course of the conversation, it was a climate change conference, and Obama is asking Jack Ma, saying, why is climate change so important to you?
Mm.
And Jack Ma talks about, it's not just my passion, it is a concern or worry for me. And he
Mm.
talks about when he was 12 years old, he
Mm.
went to swim in a lake and he almost died in the lake. It was too deep.
Mm.
And 5 years ago, he went to the same lake and the lake was totally dry.
Mm.
And he says that is why, for me, climate change is not just a imperative, it is a real concern for me. Now,
Wow.
as I share this example of Jack Ma talking about it, you can visualize it, right? You can
That's right.
imagine a river which was steaming, somebody almost drowning. Then you
Mm.
can also imagine the shock of the river being dry
Mm.
in such a short time.
Mm.
So that is what really storytelling does. It helps us to really create that impact and messaging and make our point without being preachy, without
That's right.
talking in assertions. So it's those visual movements which
Mm.
connect to our heart
Mm.
and then influence action.
Awesome. And inspires others. It makes you brings out the creativity in people.
Absolutely.
And also makes you a relatable person. Yeah. People also want to know your stories, not just about you telling stories of other people. They want to know your journey, and
Right.
it's about connecting with the heart before you connect with the hand. You know,
Totally.
and also in the selling space.
Mhm.
You are the product before they buy into the product of the organization. So it's not just about going there and being very, going on a pity party and saying, look, they want to know your story. I mean, as professionally as possible. So awesome. I'm learning a lot. If you just joined us, this is Leadership Talk with ADEGOKE, the 79 podcast, and I have Sandari speaking from Hong Kong, and we're looking at leadership and storytelling. Now, what's the where do they meet? Leadership and storytelling. Where's the connection?
Yeah. It's almost like a cultural anthropology conversation. So there's this cultural
Okay.
anthropologist called Mary Catherine Beatson, and she
Okay.
says that the human species thinks in metaphors and learns through stories.
Hmm.
And that is why storytelling is one of the best ways for a person or a brand, like you said, to establish trust.
Hmm.
When people hear stories, their brains light up in the same area that are only active when you are experiencing something. So it's
That's
a
right.
very visceral, experiential kind of moment when we're talking about stories.
Hmm.
So, as against, regurgitating facts or presenting bullet points,
Yeah.
stories make it memorable, it clears
Hmm.
our receptor channels,
Hmm.
and then it creates that meaningful communication.
That's
So
right.
our natural tendency is to embrace stories and it creates that connectedness. So two strangers really form a relationship through stories. And in
Hmm.
those small moments, you form an opinion about that person.
Hmm.
We call it the sliding door moments. It's like, when the lift doors are almost about to close,
Yeah.
somebody inside actually quickly jabs that button and helps the
Hmm.
door open so that person can come in, another person can come in. So it's
Yeah.
that, then you're saying, oh, thank you, you opened the door for me. So those are called the sliding door moments.
Hmm.
Really, trust is built in those moments. You
Hmm.
know, I'm sure you follow football.
I do. I do.
So I'm thinking about Romelu Lukaku, the
Yeah.
Belgian player who plays for Chelsea and also for
Yeah.
the Belgian team.
Yeah.
He talks about his life growing up and how he owed that his family, and I'm sure you know about this. He
Hmm.
wanted to really create a better life for his family, and he remembers the exact moment when he felt they were broke.
Hmm.
You could picture his mom at the refrigerator. He was 6 years old. He comes back home during the school lunch break,
Hmm.
and the mom is like, they used to have the same menu every day. It was bread and milk, bread and milk, bread and milk. And when you're a kid, you don't think too much about it. You don't know the other world. You don't know what else is there. You think that's
Mm.
what people eat, bread and milk, right? But he didn't realize that that's all they could afford. And that one particular day, he comes home, he walks
Yeah.
into the kitchen, and he sees his mom at the refrigerator with a bottle of milk. It looks like normal, but she's mixing something in it. And then she's shaking it up and he can't figure it out. Then she brings the lunch over to him and she's smiling as if everything is okay. But that's when he realized what was going on. She was mixing water in the milk because they didn't have enough money to even make the milk last the whole week.
Mm.
So they weren't just poor, they were broke.
Mm.
And he says that was the moment when he decided that he will change his family's fate.
Wow.
And we all know what he is today now,
Mm.
his journey and where he is. And I think it is really moments like this when somebody shares,
Light bulb
that
moments.
is the kind of bridge that you create an opinion about that person, it
Mm.
triggers a story.
Mm.
And a similar thing from a company point of view, it builds trust.
Mm.
So
Mm.
really sharing examples, experiences really creates a pull.
Mm.
And when you look at organizational level, when
Yes.
you talk about, you talked about sales.
Yeah.
Sales folks sharing stories to create a connect with the clients. How can you
That's
build a
right.
better connect? How can you
Yeah.
use stories to explain your strategy?
Mm.
Why are we doing a certain thing? Why is a change initiative coming out? How can you
Mm.
use stories to overcome resistance within the organization?
That's
How do
right.
you communicate data and move it into insights?
Mm.
Because just data is just hard facts, right? But you want to
Yeah.
move into insights. You want to know the narrative around it. So
Mm.
really using those makes the difference, and that's where the two meet.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. This is so good. This is so good. I'm sure for those who are listening and are going to be listening to the replay of the podcast, I'm sure you take a lot of notes. Now, I want you to speak to this. What if a leader is not able to use stories in his journey or a journey in true leadership? What's
Right.
the consequence of that?
Yeah. I think, like we said, stories really build trust.
Yeah.
And as a leader, trust building is one of the key things that you want your team to have, because you're not really looking at doing everything. You want your teams to be in the same page, aligned with you, and
Yeah.
doing that action.
Yeah.
So when I work with clients, I hear a lot of times that, my leaders are not impactful in communicating change. They're not inspiring action. I
Mm.
hear that, analysts are talking data. Our techies are very good at tech, but they're talking
Yes.
geeky. They can't
Mm.
talk human. They can't impact our stakeholders. This is all problem statements.
Mm.
So stories just don't describe our world. They actually shape our world. And let me share about, when Ray Gilmartin, he used
Okay.
to be the CEO of Maersk, the
Okay.
pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
And he was going to talk, he was giving a talk a few years back, talking about the economy and the regulation affecting the drug industry. And that's very topical now with, with all COVID vaccines and all that. So
Yeah.
he's talking to this room of people. He's saying how Musk is like really contributed to the world through providing life-changing drugs. He's talking about
Mm.
the company philanthropy. He's
Mm.
saying that we've created 800,000 vaccines and we've sent it to Botswana. We've sent
Mm.
1.4 million vaccines in America and so on and so forth. While all this is impactful, his audience is just glazing over.
Mm.
Because it's the most boring, he's just rattling of numbers.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear numbers. People are
Mm.
tuning out. You're getting lost in bullet points. You're losing the true value of the message.
Mm.
Ray really listened to the audience. He realized that the audience was not listening to him. So
Yeah.
he listened to them and he stopped and he just took a pause and he talked about a particular incident which happened in 1942. There was a
Yes.
young woman who had contracted an infection after a miscarriage.
Mm.
And she was hospitalized in Connecticut for a month. And for
Wow.
that entire month, she had been running very high fever, 105 degrees, and all that. She was going in and out of consciousness. The
Mm.
doctors were trying a lot of different things to treat her, and
Mm.
nothing was working. And around the time, they thought the young woman was just going to die.
Wow.
And one of the young doctors said, I've heard about this experimental treatment that is being done by this company called Merck. And if we can borrow a dose from them and try it, we can at least try if we can see if we can save her life.
Mm.
So they take almost half the stock of what was even produced because it was an experimental batch. And they
Okay.
try it on this woman. This woman, her name is Ann Miller.
Mm.
She became the first person in United States to receive this new drug. And the
Wow.
drug was penicillin.
Wow.
And it saved her life.
Wow.
So, which is why he says Musk is really believing in creating drugs which look at saving life. We work at experiments which are going to look at new age drugs, something which will work well, and that's what we want to do. We want to save people.
Amazing. Amazing.
And I mean, I just want to ask you now, as I was telling about this, you can picture that young woman, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, back in the days, about 80 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
And what a life changing thing this would have been. I mean,
Penicillin.
imagine
Yeah.
that young lady almost dying, high fever. So there are a lot of these visual moments which the story brings in, with the example brings in, which
That's right.
helps the leader share it. Now, if you
Mm.
were just presenting a deck, it's like death by PowerPoint.
Mm. Mm.
Instead,
Mm.
you're talking about an incident, a narration, and that is why leaders really need to look at how can you use it as a communication tool so you move people towards action.
Wow. 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 Effortlessly. Awesome. Awesome. This is so good. I want to celebrate and salute your expertise and depth of knowledge, on this subject matter. Leadership Talk with Adegoke, the 79th podcast, and we have on the platform Soundari from Hong Kong, and we're looking at leadership and storytelling. Now, you've given us a lot of nuggets, and I want you to speak to a leader out there. Two things that you think a leader must do right now. To use uh, two tools or two strategies regarding storytelling that a leader can use to scale their business.
Yeah. Yeah. Leadership is really not about the big things.
Yeah.
It's not about changing the world. I mean, there are
Mm,
people who do it, but regular you and me leadership is not about that. It's about having impact on individuals and making the difference using lollipop moments, as I call it, the small things which make that
mm,
difference.
mm, mm.
So I think it's really focusing on everybody can be a storyteller. It's
Yeah.
looking at, it doesn't, some people will say, when you ask are you a storyteller, they'll think of everybody else, but they will not count themselves as that. So I
Yeah.
think everybody is born with it, but you have to hear and live those stories.
Mm,
All of us have these bunch of experiences, and so we are able to say, oh, here's something that happened to me yesterday.
mm,
As I was walking down the road today, I saw this, and this is what I learned from it.
mm.
So it's really looking at those small moments and reflecting on them and building your story repertoire, building that story bank where you're keeping your stories.
That's right.
So I think, keeping in mind, how can you keep your stories real? So when you talk about people, when you talk about specifics,
Mm,
talk about when it happened, who were the characters, what was the conversation, what
mm,
happened at that time, then you're luring people into the conversation. You're
mm.
creating their minds to say, oh, so what happened next? You're drawing them into the conversation, and then it becomes a two-way dialogue.
Wow.
So I think if you look at listening as a skill, and this is a very underrated skill, I could definitely work more on it. uh, Stories are all around us.
That's right.
Like, I was just reading Bloomberg Business Week yesterday, last week's issue, and there was a note about this parents who started this coffee shop called Billy and Bow, if I remember the name right,
Mm,
because their two kids were autistic, and they
mm.
wanted to create a coffee shop which could be run by mostly differently abled people,
Yeah.
to provide it as a job opportunity. But also, a lot of the times people look at us as an NGO, as a non-profit, but they said
Yeah.
no, we want to create it as a for-profit organization. Why can't differently able people be working in a for-profit organization? Why does it have to be only a non-profit?
Mm,
So this is a great example and a totally different thinking, right?
Mm,
So,
mm,
really listening, keeping your eyes open for this and collecting them. And I don't
mm,
know about you, when we were younger, I used to grow up. So, we used to want to build up our vocabulary. So, the
mm.
minute I learned a new word,
You want
I
to
would
practice it?
immediately use it in a sentence
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah.
Sometimes, the audience may not even know the meaning of that word. Sometimes, even I won't know the full meaning of the word, whether the context
But
was
you're
right.
seen as very intelligent.
But you would use it, right? You would use it, and then you would try test it with the audience and see whether it's working, whether they are nodding, whether they are laughing, what is happening, and then you would refine it. So
Wow,
storytelling is pretty much like it.
wow,
You
wow.
share an example of what happened, then you check with the audience. Oh, so what are you making out from this? So just for
Mm.
example, when I shared the example about Lukaku, I
Yeah,
could ask you, for me it showed, about his journey.
yes,
what
right.
do you what do you make out about Lukaku as a person? I could ask you a question,
That's right.
right?
And
And
it becomes more interesting because I mean, when you look at poverty, you can use it to relate to, where he used to be and where he's now being successful, and
right.
bring out so many dimensions from that. Yeah,
Yeah, so actually then you're creating a conversation. You're also testing whether, okay, I started sharing that incident for a particular reason. Did
that's
it
right.
connect with my audience?
Yeah.
Because I think it is always, I call it the ABC, the audience before content.
Wow. Wow.
It is very important to orient yourself to the audience, whether the audience will recognize it, relate to it. What is the reason I shared? What is it that the audience connected with? Are we on the same page?
That's right.
Right,
That's
so really looking and then refining your conversation. So it is almost like a lot of practice.
mm, mm.
Whenever
Wow.
you see that somebody is an expert in sharing examples, that means they've practiced a lot.
So I can confidently say that you're a professor of storytelling.
Oh, I think
Wow.
it's work in progress. It's all learning. I think if you're
Awesome.
curious and you're asking the questions, and I remember Thomas Friedman, the person he's written a lot of very lovely books. He talks about he would give an employment to somebody whose CQ is more than their IQ, and he
Wow.
calls CQ as the curiosity quotient
Wow. Wow.
more than the
Amazing.
intelligence quotient. So really
Awesome.
looking at how you can ask those questions, how can you learn, and putting that learning mindset into, so practicing a lot,
Practice.
listening,
Practice.
hearing.
Awesome. Now, two more questions and we're done. I just love the energy. I love the enthusiasm. I love the authenticity. I just want to celebrate you and salute you for what you're doing, even globally, and reaching out and just adding value. I'm sure our listeners are enjoying this and, they'll take a lot of notes. Now, two more things. Who are your mentors? Do you have mentors?
Oh, lots of them, everybody around me. Right
Wow.
now, you, for the
Wow.
energy that you bring into the podcast, to be able to consistently do something and actually shine a spotlight on others, that is a talent. So, hats off to you for doing that.
Thank you.
And I think about Adam Grant. He wrote that the mark of a lifelong learner is recognizing that you can learn something from everyone that you meet.
Hmm.
So, knowledge you can best seek from experts.
That's right.
Wisdom can come from anywhere.
Hmm.
So, I'm part of a lot of mentorship programs. I'm a mentor in a lot of platforms, and I equally learn from my mentees about the
Hmm.
work that they do,
Wow.
and how we can really learn from everybody around us.
Wow, awesome. Now, the last but not the least question, because I'm sure we're still going to be engaging, having opportunities to speak to the world after this session. I'd like to invite you to come back again and again and again, if possible. Thank you so much.
Would
Now,
love
I
that.
want to ask you if our listeners want to reach you, how can they reach you?
Yeah. In conversations like this, it's time bound. But I do hope people can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm on Twitter as well. I'll send you my Twitter handle, but it's a very low key presence on Twitter. I think I like being in that space, but I'm not significantly active. But LinkedIn would be a great place to find me.
Okay.
And
What's your LinkedIn profile name?
My name, Soundari Mukherjea, it's the same name.
Okay,
So you'd find that there. And
awesome.
I think would love to continue the conversation with you and your viewers for sure. So please do connect with me.
Thank you, thank you. So you've heard from the professor of storytelling, the lady, very humble lady with a lot of energy, expertise, very rich, experience, background, very detailed, from all the way from Hong Kong. Sandari has spoken well on leadership, talk with ADEGOKE, and we looked at leadership and storytelling. So at the same time, we want to appreciate everyone. Do you want to say bye-bye to the audience?
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm sure the audience, I think one of the things about rapport building is when any of these examples really create another example in their mind. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen this happen. And then that's where the magic happens. We make the stories and the stories make us. So thank you so
Wow.
much, Adigoki, for creating this platform. And, I'm feeling elevated by this conversation.
Wow, wow. I'm so joyful too. This has really made my day, and I can see storytelling from, even a richer perspective. And so as you journey along, I'm sure you have more success. Thanks,
Thank
and
you
have a
so
great day, everyone. Yeah.